So we'll call the regular meeting of the Garfield Township Planning Commission to order with a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Steve, roll call.
All right. Everybody hear me? Okay. Agustinelli?
Here.
Robertson?
Here.
Klein?
Here.
Racine is absent and excused. DeGood?
Here.
Fudge?
Here.
And McManus?
Here.
All right.
All right. First item on the agenda tonight is our first of two public comments. So we have public comment at the beginning. The microphone's on. Yeah. We'll make sure.
Give it a minute? Okay. All right.
So we do have public comment at the beginning and at the end of the meetings. So this is our first public comment. We do not have any public hearings tonight, so if anybody has anything they'd like to talk about. I don't see a lot of public out tonight, but now's your chance.
You talking to anybody I know?
Yeah. I see no one coming forward, so we'll close public comment. And the next item is a review and approval of the agenda. If anybody has any conflicts of interest, now would be the time to state those.
I will be stepping aside for the discussion of the City of Traverse City Master Plan because Beckett and Rader prepared that master plan for the city.
Okay.
Make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Support.
Motion made and supported to approve the agenda as presented. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now the microphones have kicked in. All right. Next item on the agenda is the minutes from our July 10th meeting. If anybody has any corrections, comments, or questions they'd like to make to those.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Support.
Motion made and supported to approve the minutes from the July 10th, 2024 meeting. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Steve, any correspondence tonight?
No correspondence.
Okay. Town board reports, commissioner reports. Molly, town board.
No meeting.
No meeting last night, okay. Bob, ZBA?
Yes, we had a meeting in reference to, it was at 2582 Miller Creek Drive, where they were looking for relief from the wetlands buffer to place a new driveway. It was originally approved back in 2018, but they did not proceed with the work, so they're back to get it redone. And it was approved.
Okay, thank you. Chris, Parks and Rec?
We did not meet?
Did not meet? Okay, well, John's not here for joint planning, but I was there at that same meeting. We did have a meeting, and actually had the only business, the gardening club wants to put a shed in to help support their gardening, but they got a little bit of a bind because they consciously took the whole garden area out of the development window for that area, so they can't develop outside that window, but we've thrown a couple ideas out. There is one corner of the gardening area that is in the development window, so they do have a small opportunity there, so we encourage them to do that, because to go back and change that window, that envelope, to be able to put a shed in, it'd be like a major rezoning of that, and we really didn't want to open up that can of worms, so hopefully they can work with that. So, all right, Steve, staff report.
Yes, got a couple things. So, one, throughout the whole master plan process, we always did the master plan announcement, but as you already know, it was adopted earlier this month. We announced that last time, and you now have on your desks the updated copies of the master plan, including the appendix. And thank you everyone who brought the drafts back. We will use some of those pages for some of the extra copies, as much as we can anyway. And it is also posted on the website under the planning department on plans, reports, and policies. Kind of all the documents are in one spot, but the master plan is also up on the website. Couple updates on the items on our last agenda. The Potter's Home Bed and Breakfast has been forwarded for legal review, so that is ongoing. And if we get any updates, we will bring those as soon as we have them, which potentially could be the next planning commission action meeting. And then did at least hear back from the applicants on the cell tower. We kind of offered if they had something by this meeting, we might consider taking a look at it. They didn't, that was a tight turnaround, and they kind of agreed that was going to be a tight turnaround for them, but they are working on relocating the cell tower, seeing how they can get that to meet the setback requirements. So they're taking a look at how they can do that, and once they have updated plan sets or anything, they will be sending that our way. So we'll take a look at it once we have it.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. As we move on to unfinished business, there's one thing that we did, you'll see 6A has the R3 district amendments, and then also vacation home rentals is in there. But then they gave the short-term rentals its whole other category in 6B. So the short-term rental, vacation rental discussion is 6B. So as Steve introduces 6A, it's strictly the R3 district amendments. So Steve, why don't you go ahead and kick that out?
Sorry about that clarification. Probably could have clarified that at the agenda, but yeah, we split those into, since they're two different topics, we each gave them their own dedicated agenda item. So, but for 6A, the R3 zoning district, we mostly kept kind of what we had taken a look at the last study session. So just to kind of go through again, what is proposed that we took a look at was clarifying or updating definition of a multifamily dwelling and adding definitions for a 3-family, which would be a triplex, and a quadplex, which would be a 4-family. And kind of specifically defining them. These are a building, a portion thereof, or buildings. It was kind of confusing the way it was written as before, but kind of just indicating it's a building or a portion or group of buildings with 5 or more dwelling units. And then a triplex would be with 3 dwelling units, or for 3 single-family dwelling units, and a quadplex would be 4 single-family dwelling units. And then proposing, as we discussed, to add triplex and quadplex by right in only the R3 district. So we have the draft of the use chart and the actual section 315 for multifamily. And then the other thing was just kind of clarifying the minimum lot area, minimum lot width, and minimum yard setbacks, and kind of adding in to account for triplex and quadplex. For the lot width, some people asked about the with or without public sewer, and we looked, at least we didn't find anything, like I was trying to find examples. I didn't find anything specifically, and I was trying to look up like state standards for like, can you do well and septic on something larger than 2-family? I didn't really find anything specific, but also kind of taking a look at this, the way it was proposed is just keeps it the same as multifamily minimum width of 100, which would be if they were like, it's essentially equivalent to 1 or 2 family without public sewer. So it just precludes a smaller width, but you're already adding dwelling units at that point. So at least from staff's perspective and kind of making a recommendation, just kind of keeping it simpler, that what it is at multifamily already seemed to make sense to us. And also the way it's written now, with multifamily being defined as 3 or more, doesn't make a provision for with or without public sewer separately. and has the minimum at 100. So at least we didn't really, I don't know if that answers the question from last time, but we didn't really make any changes to that specifically. If Plan Commission wants to, we can try to devise something a little bit different, but yes, questions?
Blair Township was able to approve 22 units on 6.5 acres with no
Okay,
public sewer or water.
okay,
And they were able to do it because the health department gave them approval to have
Okay.
a septic system. So I
Okay.
don't think each individual unit has a septic.
has its own, okay.
If they have a community.
Has like a community one. Is how many units was it? It's 20-some?
22 units on
Okay.
6.5 acres.
Okay. I'm assuming 6.5 acres has at least a minimum width of 100? I would assume it has 100
I
feet.
don't think those houses each have, they wanted it
Oh.
within certain setbacks from Garfield Road and
Okay,
lot lines, but
okay,
they're pretty close.
okay. But like the lot, is it all one lot, do you know? Or is it
It's all
divided
one
into?
lot.
It's all one lot.
It was a
okay.
farm,
Okay,
and the farmhouse sold.
okay,
That's the cracky place, you're familiar with that.
yeah,
And, yeah, they took the house and barn down and,
Okay.
and went ahead and did it. There 11, I think 11 individual units. They're not all one unit.
Mhm.
It's 11 individual units with duplexes each.
okay,
Or
okay.
duplexes.
All right.
I mean, that's a
So, yeah.
lot.
Okay.
Do they-
Is that the one right across from like the homeschoolers?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, okay, now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they have, do you know much about it? They have like is it condominium type of thing? Is it individual ownership?
Individual ownership, individual houses
Okay.
attached. I mean, you just buy one side.
Okay.
Okay. Because sort of everything without public sewer is shown as 100 feet. The only ones with in the district, and I think it's that way right now, is one family would be a minimum lot width of 65 feet and two family minimum width of 70 feet. Would it make sense for a triplex or quadplex to have a smaller minimum lot width than 100 and maybe make it like 75 or 80 or kind of step up the way one and two family with public sewer are?
Is the lot width because you want to accommodate for a septic system?
When we have minimum lot widths, I mean, that can be one of the reasons. Do you have that? Like, yeah, if you're in a more kind of urban environment with utilities, like you think of like narrow lot widths, like in the city, or some of them are very narrow. Some of it's just to, it's one of the measures to also regulate density, but if we're trying to encourage density, could perhaps lower that in cases where you have the utilities in place. Yeah, it's a thought. I don't know if it's specifically always for a septic system, but that's part of kind of density. So.
What are we trying to accomplish again?
Um,
In regard to whether we include a reference to public sewer and public water?
So currently in the ordinance, there's the distinction between that for one family and two family, not on multifamily. And right now, those cover everything in terms of, like, because multifamily is currently defined as 3 or more. We're debating whether to adjust that. So the lot width covers one family with and without, two family with and without, and multifamily does not make that distinction, presumably because most multifamily, although we've now seen an example in another community where it doesn't, but most would be on public sewer and public utilities. So if we define 3 or 4 family, should it fall on the side of, do we distinguish between that and have different standards, or do we kind of do it the way we have with multifamily?
Still confused.
Okay, that's okay.
Well, we are
Pull up.
trying to encourage more density.
Yeah.
We're trying to find lots for builders to build on. There's not a lot of places to build, particularly in moderate to lower income groups. We don't have the lots. It's hard to build a house for, $400,000 if you gotta pay
Right.
$75,000 for the land.
Yeah.
I think we were trying to get to a point where we would be able to have smaller houses and smaller lots.
Yep. And that's, at least for the 1 and 2 family, is something that's in the R3 district at the moment. So, I think if we carry that philosophy to 3 and 4, that would make sense.
So right now,
Yeah.
we have a reference within the ordinance that 1 and 2 family, there's a distinction between the size of the allowable lot based on whether they're on septic or not.
Correct. So this is, and specifically in the R3 district, and actually R2 as well, but R3 is the only one we're considering for 3 and 4 family. But right now that is in place in our current ordinance for the R3 district.
For 1 and 2.
For 1 and 2.
And what are the consequences if we don't do anything for 3 and 4?
It would remain sort of as they are now, at least on that particular standard. Like we're proposing to define those and make those by right, but in this chart, they just have the same minimum lot width as multifamily. So it'd be the same as what they'd be able to do now, which would have a minimum width of 100 feet.
So you get a
Yeah.
bonus
Yeah.
if you are on sewer and water
Mm-hmm.
and you're doing a 1 or 2 family,
Mm-hmm.
you get a bonus in that you can have a smaller lot size if you're on sewer and water.
Or at least sewer, because you don't need the septic field for the
Right.
sewer.
But
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah.
no reference to the septic field, there's a dimensional requirement in the
Chris,
ordinance.
just to clarify, there's not a break on the lot size, just the width. The minimum
Right.
square footage stays the
But the
same.
width, lining them up along a road,
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Correct.
I'm just-
narrow, every number of lots, you get
Yeah,
one
yeah.
more lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're saying is, we're not providing any sort of bonus for
Right.
a multifamily
Mm-hmm.
to be on sewer and water. You're not going to get more 3 and 4 multifamily units
Mm-hmm.
by offering a narrower lot size if you're on sewer and water. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to offer a narrower lot size for 1
Okay.
and 2 family if you're on
Mhm.
sewer and water,
Mm-hmm.
and to not do so and just have one fixed lot size for
Mm-hmm.
3 and 4 family,
Mhm.
triplex and quadplex.
Okay. Yeah.
Or is that square footage per unit?
Yes.
So that is
4,000 per.
Yeah.
4,000 per unit.
Because that's what we did with the minimum lot area. We kept it the same as multifamily. We just did it, defined it as what 4,000 times 3 and times 4 would be.
Right.
So we kept the other dimensional requirements for minimum lot area and lot width essentially the same, but just allowing triplex and quadplex by right as they're defined.
I disagree with Chris. I think we should have water and sewer required for every development, if it's available.
Well, if it is
Well,
available,
I
they
think-
have to do it.
You have to if it's available.
Yeah. If it's available, yes.
It's available every place in the township if you're willing to pay the freight.
I think if it's on the front, I think they have to if it's available, right?
Yeah.
If it's, I believe state laws, within 200 feet of available sewer, you have to hook up.
Oh, I understand
Yeah.
that, but what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
maybe you gotta run it, 500 feet or 1,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
You should seriously require sanitary sewer. I mean, I've seen too many of these things collapse, and I've seen some really bad problems over the years if you got a septic tank that the field is not maintained.
Mm-hmm.
These people are not gonna maintain them. If you've got a 3 or 4 unit place, everybody's gonna say, well, it's his problem, not my type thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there and done that, and we don't
Okay.
wanna get in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we got a two different issues here, the width of the
Yeah.
lot
Mm-hmm.
and then the size of the lot. So
Correct.
as far as to answer your first question about the width of the lot, I think that the 2 and 3 family, the 3 and the 4 family
Yep.
should stay at 100 feet.
Mhm.
And regardless, and not give them a bonus if they have water and
Yeah,
sewer.
okay.
Like
Then-
Gwen's written.
I have no
That's-
problem with a lot width, I have no
Okay.
problem with that.
But then as far as our, the ordinance you have there talks about minimum lot size for R1, it should be like 15,000 for water and sewer and 20,000 without. Is that correct?
So yeah, in the other districts, so yeah, in R1,
Yes, and then R2, what does R2 say in that?
yeah, so R1, you're right, is 15,000 for sewer, 20 without. R2 is 12,000 with public sewer and 15,000 without, for
Okay.
both one or two family.
I feel that we should move that up one more step and create something for 3 and 4 family.
Mhm.
And 12 is fine for sewer, and 16 is fine for 4, with a 4 family with sewer. But we need to put something in there without sewer. We need, in the 3 family, we need to create a number, and in the
Yeah.
4 family, we need to create a number.
On the minimum lot area.
Minimum lot area.
On the area, okay.
That would help
Just wanna
encourage them to
check
get
as
it.
well.
Yes, that would do, and when you look at the zoning map, and there's very few places that can take a 3 and a 4 family that don't have sewer, but there is a couple, so. So in order for that, I think it wouldn't take much to create 2 numbers and.
Are we, and I understand what both of you are saying, are we gonna restrict this so much so that, I mean, I don't have a very good idea of how many lots there are right now that even legitimately qualify.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the aspect that somebody could basically use this to create a new development, as you suggested happened in Blair, where they created greater density with 11
Joint.
duplexes. I'm just concerned, I guess, have you and John taken any look at what are the consequences? How many lots are really going to end up eligible
Yeah.
to implement this with any one of these scenarios? And what's the dark horse of the consequence of, are we opening up a use by right to an 11 lot, or, an 11 duplex, 22 unit, dense, and would have to have, I'm sure they'd have to have an individual or a community well, and then they'd have to have, that one definitely has a community septic system, the one you referenced.
Mhm.
It just strikes me as it all makes sense, the numbers and everything as we talk about them, but it's really, what are the consequences once we implement this ordinance? And I'm not really sure I have a firm understanding of the consequences.
I just wanted to see what this might be. I'm just picking one along Barlow. I have no representation of what this parcel actually is, but it's in R3, and it defaults to, I think this one is 130 feet that way, and then a 100 feet. So that one is 100 by 130.
Yep, but
Yeah.
I guess that's not my point, though.
Okay.
Are we doing this ordinance to encourage an empty lot
Mm-hmm.
to get developed with a quadplex? Or are we encouraging someone to come in and tear down a single-family home and put up a quadplex? Or are we encouraging someone to take an empty tract of land and build a neighborhood
Mhm.
of quadplexes?
I don't know if we're encouraging specifically like someone to come tear down something. I think it's more if there's an opportunity, like what is allowed either by right or by special use permit in a district. Like someone could propose doing a triplex or quadplex right now, just they would have to do the special use permit. I don't think we're specifically encouraging like tear downs. It's more just if there's an opportunity to like add density and someone wants to do that. If someone owns a piece of property and would like to do that and it makes sense and it fits,
I think ultimately we still want to step back and realize it's only R3. We're not talking R1 and R2. This amendment's only for the R3 district, which is multifamily anyway. So it's you know, I think your point would be more poignant if it was like, hey, we're talking about allowing this in an R1 and R2 district, then you might see some of the things you're talking about. But this just gives some more flexibility in the R3 district, is what we started out with, so.
Yeah.
Well, to Chris's point, how many lots do we have that would be possible? I mean, if
Yeah.
we're only talking about 10 lots in the whole township that would be R3 and could be split into,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know like the width of all of the lots. I spot checked that one, but like some of them are narrower. Again, I'm just kind of picking on a random parcel, but
what areas do we have? We have the Barlow area.
but, like this one is only 75 feet wide. In terms of, I don't know the area of that particular lot. What is it, 75 by, we can measure it here.
Steve, I guess I'm kind of off of we're getting into all these little minutia. I think I remember at the core what we were trying to achieve, but then we're getting into all these little minutia, and I'm worried that we're going to rewrite the ordinance in a way that it doesn't really achieve anything. I mean, to your point, Bob, if you've got to run a quarter mile of sewer in order to build a quadplex, nobody's going to do it, because it's not going to financially work to put in those utilities for a boost from 1 unit to 4. So again, it comes back to what do all the conditions we're talking about actually result in? We've spent time perhaps rewriting the ordinance in a way that doesn't achieve anything for anyone.
Right, okay.
Well, you want to look at them 75-foot lots and imagine putting a duplex, or I mean a fourplex on there. So you said them were 75 by 100?
75, this one,
I'm just wondering if you'd ever want any more than
that's 75 by 150. This one happens to be. The other one was like 130 by 100. So 75 by 150 is,
75 by 150 is what?
we can, yeah. It's a little over 11,000. So kind of how it's written at the moment, a lot like that, if it were on public sewer, you would be at least a minimum of 70 feet wide and 10,000 square feet, and that's in our current ordinance. So
But
if someone,
minimum lot size 12 would not allow it.
I'm-
So
yeah.
you'd be back to a duplex, you'd be back to a.
right, you could maximum do a duplex, and that's in our current ordinance, and that would stay the same. So if something like a triplex would not fit on a lot like that, like a 75 by 150, if that would not fit, then this might make sense. If we think something like that could fit on a lot like that, do we want to adjust one thing or another to make that possible? If we think this is in the ballpark, if we think you need to adjust or have different standards for if it's on sewer or not. But yeah, just kind of testing that particular one, yeah.
So I don't feel we want to get any smaller than what we have in our 10,000 and then 12 and 16.
Yeah.
And then, and I'm saying even get them larger if we don't have the sewer. So I'm okay with these numbers
Yeah.
for sewer.
Okay.
So you want to put a stipulation in there that,
If they don't have the sewer, I want them to be a little bigger, because we do that in R1. I'm not, I know we're not dealing with R1 today, but we
Yeah.
do that there because we need more room for the drain field and the replacement drain field. And I feel we need the same thing in the 3 and the 4 family. Just a little more room, but it's hardly gonna get used. If you look at anything orange, it's pretty much everything's got water and sewer anyway. I think we talked about in that area. Ain't there an area there somewhere that's got drain fields right there where you're at in your map?
Possibly, depending on, like, it could depend on how old it is, if it existed before the sewer did. I don't know specifically on this one, but like most of the R3 areas are close in. They're on at least either on the sewer network or close to the sewer network, and would most likely have to connect. I also was looking at the purpose statement of the R3 district itself. It doesn't mention water or sewer specifically, but talks about like the efficient provision of infrastructure. Talks about adequate public facilities and services existing with capacity to serve development. So it doesn't specifically like require R3, but just that adequate services are there, which often might be the case that it is water and sewer. So.
But we could have a public hearing on this ordinance as it stands right now, and perhaps as additional information, you could bring back a, because would you agree if there's no R3 that doesn't have sewer and water, then there's no reason to write it in there, because if anybody wanted to rezone something R3, we'd require them to bring sewer and water. So you could bring that information to our next meeting.
Yeah.
And it would be, information that could inform the public hearing.
Okay.
And maybe, I'm not opposed to putting it in, but maybe we don't need to put it in because it doesn't exist.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on this? This is an introduction, so in your packet on the planning department report is a suggested,
You want the motion?
yeah.
Motion that the draft proposed zoning ordinance text amendment as attached to the planning department report 2024-53 be scheduled for a public hearing for the August 14th, 2024 Planning Commission regular meeting.
Support. Motion made and
You can have it,
supported.
Joe.
All right.
Motion made and supported to move planning department report 2024-53 to public hearing on August 14th. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 6B is Planning Department Report 2024-56, short-term rental discussion. If you remember back, a couple things happened in February and April, triggered staff to talk to us about discussing some options pending legislation. So Steve, you want to kick this one off?
Yes, thank you, Joe. So yeah, some of the background is, earlier this year, there were some bills, specifically one, House Bill 5438, introduced in the Michigan legislature. And as you may be aware, there was some media coverage about our discussion of this topic, which we mostly wanted to study, if we recall correctly, mostly responding to the fact that legislators debating this, it has been debated in the past few legislative sessions to allow short-term rentals at some level. And it's an idea that seems to not be going away. We don't know the current status or the currently proposed bill. The session's still ongoing. We don't know if it's going to be passed at this moment, and it could change its form if it did. It's something we're monitoring. There's actually you can monitor the House bills on Michigan Legislature's website. You can actually track. This happens to be House Bill 5438's page. If you just Google Michigan Legislature HB and whatever number, you can track a bill that's being debated. Mostly we want to be prepared because, at least in this form of the bill that's proposed, would prohibit an ordinance that completely bans or prohibits short-term rentals. So that's why we wanted to study that, to be prepared if that does happen. If it doesn't pass, we don't have to pass anything right away. But we want to be prepared either way. So in the report, it kind of goes over a few kind of key things that are proposed in the bill itself, which actually defines a short-term rental, talks about what a local unit of government may enact in terms of reasonable regulations and may uphold zoning decisions, provided that they do actually 4 things. If those regulations safeguard the public health, safety, and welfare, including but not limited to fire safety standards and blight mitigation. Determine the number of units allowed to be used as a short-term rental by any method of its choosing. Establish a process by which the local unit of government may reduce or expand the number of units allowed under subdivision B. And establish a process by which the local unit of government may revoke a permit under this act, including the process to challenge the revocation. It kind of talks about how a local government can, they're making provisions to allow for that revocation. But the very last note is that a local unit of government shall not enact or enforce any ordinance, rule, or regulation, including but not limited to a zoning ordinance, rule, or regulation that has the effect of totally banning or prohibiting short-term rentals. So that is what is proposed in the draft bill that's under consideration at the moment. Again, could change, could not get passed at all, but we wanted to be prepared for that language. So based on discussions we've had at the last study sessions, we, as staff, we outlined kind of a few things for a potential approach. One is to provide a definition of short-term rentals that would match what's in the legislation, or at least proposed, and if that were to pass, so that it aligns with, if we're kind of relying on states' regulation of this, that we align with the state definition so that they mean the same thing. And then proposed districts to allow this in, because I think one of the main concerns has been the potential impacts of having short-term rental in residential. I think that's what most people are worried about. I think that's certainly a lot of valid concerns. So short-term rentals are often compared with hotels, which are currently allowed in 3 of the commercial districts, CG, CH, and CP. We also allow commercial district housing development in the CG, CH, and CP. And we reviewed a couple of these in the last few years, the one behind Baymont, Marengo, 31, and then the one earlier this year on Garfield, just south of South Airport at Garfield and Dual. Those were commercial district housing developments that have their own set of standards, also allowed in CG, CH, and CP. And since a short-term rental would be defined, and even in our current ordinance, vacation home rental is defined as a commercial use of a residential dwelling, the proposed approach would be allow for short-term rental in the commercial district housing development, or align it with that so that they're only allowed in CG, CH, and CP. So the same kind of consistency throughout those. The other thing that, at least as the state legislation is proposed, or as the state bill is proposed, you could regulate it through licensing. There's also kind of companion bills that talk about provision of, I think not just licensing, but that they're under the same like taxes that hotels are under. So kind of aligning these things all together. So sort of like a package of bills being debated all together. But one approach is also to potentially establish a licensing ordinance. And so we kind of took a look at some examples and compiled what could be a potential approach of a licensing ordinance. And that's included as an attachment. And talks about kind of different aspects of it. Part of doing it as a license is that it could be renewed. Whereas like in zoning, there'd have to be a whole, or there is an entire revocation process. Licensing could be more, as a police power ordinance, kind of potentially quicker to enforce. It doesn't have the same like mechanisms that a zoning ordinance approval, which still might be part of this, but that if you also had to get a license, there's provisions under the licensing on like how they can operate, when they can operate. So it seemed to be at least something to consider as an approach. So this is what is up for consideration. And again, because it's just studying to be prepared for if bills end up passing or not, there's no action needed right now. We can be prepared if it happens, but there's no action needed at this moment, but just for discussion.
Well, a couple of years ago, at least 2 years ago, when they started this kind of talk, the legislature was coming down with some ideas that it would be a use by right for everybody. And that was, you know, it's transitioned. It's better than it was. It was taking all power of any kind away from the townships. When we started looking at it, the people in this township who lived in residential came out in droves and said, no way. We don't want it. We don't want it up on Wayne Hill. We don't want it on Silver Lake. We don't want it along the river. We don't want it in residential areas. And so I think we're responding to that by coming up with something that puts it into Cherryland Mall, Buffalo Mall, you know, some of those other areas that would accommodate that. You're not, you know, 20 feet away from a revolving door kind of a situation. You know who's there. So I'm happy that they made some changes to it, and that enables us to talk about it now.
Yep.
So,
Steve, is there any idea, you know, one thing we talked about back probably in April now is that should we enact a change to the ordinance that allows it in some area ahead of the legislation? Is there, once the legislation's enacted, will it limit us on what we can do to regulate it?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically. I think at least from what I've seen from other state legislation, like for example, when they had the energy siting things from the wind and solar that came up last year, there was sort of a time period before that took effect. I don't know, because this is just being debated right now, I don't know if they would propose that it would have immediate effect, or if there would be sort of that delayed effect to have, to allow communities to be able to craft an ordinance. That's a good question. I don't have a solid answer to it.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to speak for John, who's not here tonight, but that was one of his concerns, that if we were to wait, we might be really restricted on what we could do later, you know. And so it's kind of the, you know, cart before the horse or something, but, you know, there is a, you know, we know that there's, Molly said it's been going on for a while. They've been talking about this. We've feared that, you know, this would happen. You know, Garfield has taken a firm stance for a long time that we're not going to allow it. And you know, one thing, you know, we point to is, remember the survey that we did of the township residents? It was an overwhelming response that the taxpayers of Garfield Township don't want short-term rentals approved. In the residential areas are where that is primarily focused on. So, you know, we're just discussing it tonight, but what are the, you know, anybody else have any thoughts on what staff has brought to us and recommending anything else?
Well, if we really think that something's gonna happen, we probably should draft something and talk about it. We gotta start somewhere, so we wanna get ahead of the game.
How does everybody feel about the approach that staff is taking here, looking at the 3C districts and drafting something allowing it there?
Yeah.
What's everybody's flavor on that? Go ahead.
I like it as an incentive. You know, we want to continue to develop the malls. You know, we want to, those are areas that it would fit. You know, we might see some new construction there. We might see some really innovative uses there. And I think that idea is a good start for it.
Mhm.
so.
Okay.
Could really incent redevelopment,
Yeah.
in those areas.
Yeah.
It's encouraging that it says that it will allow local units of government to maintain authority to regulate short-term rentals, so it still allows us to have
Yeah.
the ability to monitor and review that.
About the licensing piece, anybody have any thoughts on the licensing?
That's gonna be a paper nightmare for somebody if we do it. 'Cause somebody's gotta keep track of all these and find them and.
The township would charge a fee, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Well, I'm sure there'd be a fee, but my
Mhm.
gosh, I'd be willing to bet that the majority of people will not come in and get a license. They'll just go until somebody catches them.
Well, you'd be limited, though. I mean, you'd have a license, it would have whatever address it is, and you would know where they are,
I
but
understand,
the
but
township might need to hire more personnel to regulate them,
well, you
that's
gotta
for sure.
find out
and
where they're at,
so,
sure.
You know, we've got to figure out a way to cover those taxes and that kind of stuff.
My personal experience and belief is that there are other communities in Northwest Michigan, townships that are dealing with the same thing, and having to hire staff.
Yep.
Small townships having to hire staff in order to administer
Yep.
and regulate
License.
and track down people who aren't licensed.
Many of them that jumped in are now regretting it.
Yep.
You know, there are residents that live in residential areas are not very happy.
Oh, right, yeah. The communities I'm thinking of are more west of us that have long-standing experience
Mhm.
with
With that.
short-term rentals, with family-owned cottages and such. But it still makes for an interesting situation. Some of them in Benzie County have limited the number, and they've picked a number and then been surprised at how many people actually come in that they weren't even aware needed to have a permit. And what's interesting about well, I'm curious to back up for just a sec. Would it be possible for you to prepare a map that
Okay.
just shows what areas of the township
Mhm.
would be eligible for short-term rentals, so we could really get a visual
Mhm.
and under these specific zoning classifications that you referenced.
Yep.
And then I'd be curious to see a map of existing single-family homes or any kind, or not just single-family, but multifamily, any kind of existing home, because the overall map would show us where short-term rentals could actually be developed as new developments. And then the second map would show us existing homes that could be immediately converted upon us enacting this ordinance.
Like existing dwelling units in those three districts, yeah,
Yes.
okay. Existing dwelling units in,
Or, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the development we just approved over on Garfield, near Garfield and South Airport, would be immediately eligible, wouldn't it?
on Garfield and Dual, that corner?
Yes,
Yep.
Garfield and Dual.
That is a CG. So yeah, the only commercial district housing developments that I think we have to look and see what else is out there, but the ones that have been reviewed in the last couple of years are the ones, that one?
Yeah, you don't need to show them to me now.
Okay, I know where those two are, though, yeah.
But let's look at that at our next
Yeah,
meeting.
That's okay.
And then,
That's one of them.
and then, Joe, you asked about the ordinance. A couple of things I liked. Having been looking at similar ordinances in a community that both my parents and my in-laws own property in, homes, in fact, that have been doing this. I'm interested in the parsing the designate the licensee and what the intent is there versus, my understanding is that there are corporate or investment interests that are moving into communities and buying up many units. Now, we may look at that map and say there's so little opportunity that it's maybe not significant, but at the same time, this is a a licensing ordinance that if we would have it in place, and let's say the state re-looks at this or comes out on the other end where we've enacted this licensing ordinance and the state says you can do it anywhere. And then this becomes our licensing ordinance. That's not what they're proposing right now in the
Correct,
current
yeah.
legislation. But if we enact this and then the legislature does something more broadly, I think we need to just consider what the consequences of what's in here are, because it will be on the books if we choose to approve it. So to get back to it, the licensee issue, like when we think of this in terms of being, long-term residents, community members of Northwest Michigan, we're thinking of the family cottage or somebody who owns I can think of folks who, they're local residents, they got married, they got one unused home and they're deciding whether to sell it or not. It's all like local people. But what about people moving in and investing in our community to create short-term rentals as a for-profit business? And so what does it mean to be a licensee? I'm curious about that, in what your intent is in the language of the ordinance.
Okay.
And then the other aspects I'm curious about are, I like that there's to be a, what did you term it, a representative or a local agent, somebody who's available on a 24-hour basis to respond to the needs. I'm not sure the extent of those needs. Some of the communities that I'm familiar with, they expect that local agent. So if there's a complaint, then who responds to the complaint? The police respond. So there's a neighbor who complains that there's a lot of noise. Well, how does that get addressed in, as you said, Joe, or you said a revolving door? There's a different resident in a single family home every week. So who takes responsibility for telling some people to quiet down or to stop partying late at night? And how does law enforcement get involved in that situation? Or is there a township agent, or is this local agent of the owners responsible for responding to that? And how does that communication even take place? Or are we worried about it? I.e., I live next door to one of these, and there's a lot of noise on a given day. Do I call the police? Do I call the local agent? Do I call the township to make a complaint? With regard to the complaints, one thing that I like that you had in here, Steve,
Okay.
there it is. On page 6 of 10, it says, a pattern of patron conduct in the neighborhood of licensed premises, which is a violation of the law and or disturbs the peace, order, and tranquility of the neighborhood. I think that's kind of balanced in that, if I own one and I'm renting it out, and I'm mostly renting it out as much as I possibly can to people who I know, who are going to be quiet and well-behaved, but I get a bad apple, right? Or I get two bad apples. I mean, I like the pattern of patron conduct. So if there's regular calls to this place, we as the township can revoke the license because you have a pattern of renting to people who misbehave. And I like that without, a neighbor might have to tolerate a pattern for a while before the license gets revoked. But there's a balance there. A neighbor can't just get a license revoked on one claim. There needs to be a pattern. So I think the other thing I'm curious about, because I'm familiar with the city and again some other licensing ordinances, what level of inspection are you anticipating?
Okay.
Again, if I'm a single owner of one short-term rental, it seems to me maybe, or at least it's worth discussion, is it onerous to have a township representative come in and make a broad spectrum inspection of my single-family short-term rental in terms of whether it has, and I'm asking, is it onerous? I don't know. Fire alarms, fire extinguisher. What is the level of inspection that we're going to provide? I think that the city has minimum measurements for, or at least some of these other townships ordinance. There's minimum measurements for bedrooms and numbers of bedrooms, and it gets, maybe it's onerous, maybe it's not, but part of the discussion needs to be what gets baked into this as to, because I know for a fact that there are small cabins in Benson County that have been rented out for years, right? Decades. And
They don't meet code.
they don't meet code, right? You know, they had a single bed in what used to be a closet, but so are we as the township going to take on responsibility for that in this ordinance or not? And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I know it's different aspects of what other communities have been dealing with. This is a complicated, hairy issue, and we've been able to avoid it for a long time by kind of, you know, digging in our heels and saying no. And we just got to look at all the different aspects, and you guys have made a great start. I think this is a good, solid document.
Well, thank you.
And, you know, if we can, if you guys could, you know, reflect on some of those questions and concerns.
I think those are good things to bring up. So, no, but thank you. Also, kudos to John, I think mostly put this one together. So, yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all the comments. I think there's a couple things we need to, you know, I think we're going the right direction. Let's keep it moving. Let's you know, as we parallel the legislation potentially moving through the Lansing, that we keep our focus on it as well. I ask about the licensing. I like the licensing idea because of the fact that we can pull a license exactly for the reasons that you said. If we issue a license, they know, you know, I think we owe it to ourselves and our citizens that we keep an eye on these places and make sure they do operate under the rules that we put forth. So I agree with the licensing portion of it. The consistency, let's get a definition in place that matches what other people define as short-term rentals, you know, so I like what I'm seeing. I like the direction it's going. You know, again, we're not taking action tonight, but I think maybe suggesting to staff keep it moving forward based on the comments.
And follow up on these questions, yeah. Yeah, okay. Any other questions or topic parts to this to follow up on specifically?
Is it possible to find out through a phone call the status of this legislation?
That's a good question. I think I was following mostly either the state legislature's website on it or the MTA and others provide update, like a lot of, I'm sure Michigan Association Planning is taking a look at this as well. Yeah, I don't know specifically. I mean, it's the state legislature, they have lots of priorities. I don't know when this one's going to come up on the docket.
Well, I would think with the current ongoing, nothing's going to happen this year.
Well, the session ends after, at the end, is it at the end of this year? Or at the very beginning of 25? It was in, I don't know exactly when the end date is.
I know, but
it's,
with the election and everything, that
Right.
stuff isn't getting much attention.
But if it doesn't move forward, it has to be reintroduced.
Be reintroduced,
in the next
yeah.
session, which would start at the end, in beginning of next year, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Who is paying attention in
I think they're
in grade
done.
school?
But yeah, I believe there is a like lame duck session, or part of it goes after the election date, if I recall correctly. Again, yeah, who was paying attention in civics class? So.
Civics class.
We need the students here from May. They can tell us
Exactly.
exactly when these things are. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we can figure out if there's been any movement lately. No.
Well, a couple of things that were asked for tonight I like is the a map showing the districts that where
Mhm.
potentially could happen, the
Yep.
existing dwelling units in those districts, and then you know, keep working on the ordinance itself and tweaking that. Looks good.
Yep, okay. One thing we didn't actually put in there, but because we mostly focused on the licensing portion of it, is if there would be any standards specifically in the zoning ordinance. I think most of the topics could be covered in licensing, but even just having standards that like all short-term rentals shall require a license under the licensing ordinance and whatever number it would be, like even a basic that, and are only permitted in a dwelling unit that has already been approved, in something akin to that you just tie bar it to the licensing ordinance and the housing that has already been approved in those districts. So, but I'm going to just write down current status of legislation, see if we can find out any updates.
Well, and if we only, right now are talking about a commercial district of some sort,
Yeah,
they're all gonna have water and sewer, so they don't have to worry about,
right.
septic inspections and all those things.
Yeah.
That would be part of, I mean, if we got outside of that,
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to go in there, make sure the electrical is up to snuff, and make sure that the septic system is operational, and, you know, make sure the water is clean, and some of those things for public safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would tie back to, inspecting it, kind of what level of inspection that safeguards the public safety.
But it'll depend on where,
Yeah.
you know, where it is. If you're on water and sewer, you don't have to worry about some things.
Oh, right, those two things anyway, yeah. Okay.
What about a limit to the, like that building that's getting built on Dual and Garfield with 20 units? Could all 20 of them be short-term rentals, or we want to put a limit on it to limit it to, like, the bed and breakfast have 1,200 feet between them and,
Right,
anything like
yeah,
that?
that's true. And the bill as proposed would allow for determining the number of units allowed to be as a short-term rental. And I think that's something I was thinking about in terms of like a mechanism. For example, the two commercial district housing developments were reviewed as special use permits because they're special use in those two commercial districts. When they proposed, they were just dwelling units. If they were suddenly allowed to be eligible to do this, would they have to amend that special use permit? Would it just be tied to the licensing? And would there be a limit on the number of units if we want to establish that in either the licensing part or directly in the zoning ordinance? I think that's a great topic to discuss. But yeah, and would they be able to do that as they have been currently approved?
Well, using the dual road,
Yeah.
Dual and Garfield,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a hotel. You know, if we didn't put some restriction there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when do we define it as a hotel?
Right.
And those units are not for sale. Those units belong to one organization,
Mm-hmm.
like a hotel, and, you know, they're,
Maybe specifically, we allow a
we don't
certain
allow the
percentage of the building
hotel.
to be short-term rental or a certain
Right.
percentage of the
how do
units.
we make sure that's defined?
Because hotels also have specific standards to them. So if it were all
Yeah.
rented out, do they suddenly need to meet the standards of hotel? And I don't know if the way that was approved, if that would be, a hotel as a use would be by right, but the way it was built and cited, I don't know off the top of my head, does that meet all of the standards for hotel and motel? That's a good question as well. But it seems at least feasible, we could limit the number or maybe percentage of them in it, like
Yeah.
no more than 25% in any one building or development, something akin to that. STRs per development or lot? Question mark?
Bridges 45 up there, would any of that be,
That is R3.
so
Yep,
that's
R3 would not be allowed, yep.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
I was gonna say, if you did 25% of those, you'd have a whole lot of rental units.
Yep. But yeah, that is R3 district, so that would not be, yeah.
It's not one of
But the
those.
Long Lake apartments we approved up there, is that what zoning district is that in?
Long Lake
Brookside?
Apartments.
We don't know the Olsons. No, the
Oh.
Olsons.
The Olsens.
At the
The
food
apartment.
store.
Oh, above, yeah, right next to their store.
Right.
It's in a PUD.
Okay.
Um,
It's not a commercial district. then.
It's not a commercial district, though. Yep. That is PUD. Yep.
Because that's actually, if that were in a commercial district, that would be in an area that would be approved, and it probably wouldn't be very disruptive because there are no,
And there aren't very many
Residents.
of them.
yeah,
Right.
so.
Is, I guess I just want to be sure too, though, that it's strict enough so that somebody couldn't say, well, it's a PUD that creates the equivalent of a commercial district, and therefore I should be able to. So if you could just add that to the list of things to
Yep.
look into.
Mhm.
I mean, the way we're talking about it right now, it's a PUD, wouldn't qualify.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And if we need to explicitly state that too, shall not be permitted in a plan development, or if there's provisions already in that, how does that impact how the plan development section's already written? Yeah. So impact.
We asked enough questions to double length the document.
Yeah, we
No.
want it to be,
And that's why we wanted to start early. I mean, yeah, this is, it's, do we know if this is pending currently? It at least doesn't seem at its exact moment, but we know it's out there. We know it's percolating, so being prepared allows us to be better prepared to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community, and that's what, we want to do.
I mean,
But-
we're brainstorming, we're having good discussion early.
Yeah.
Rather than a knee-jerk reaction later, we're able to craft and develop something that we can live with, makes sense, so it's all good.
good.
All right.
Right.
If nobody has any other comments, we'll move on to item 6C, which is Planning Department Report 2024-54, the zoning ordinance update on sign ordinance, and walk through on that.
All right. All right, and since we just walked through kind of one in great detail, next on the list was the sign ordinance, which is also very kind of dry topic. So sorry for sign ordinance, but another one that there was impact of. In this case, it was like case law from U.S. Supreme Court cases, and we included actually. John Racine is not here, but we included a article from a law firm that has been that I think has done webinars for MTA before. Fahey Schultz, it's FSBR, whatever their names are, but they have kind of done walkthroughs of these cases, so we provided some of that. They also have done webinars. I think if you just search them. If you'd like to watch a webinar of them talking about sign ordinances for an hour, you are more than welcome to do that. I speaking from experience. So. But what we wanted to at least put out there, staff's kind of perspective, we wanted to go through, we've taken a look at that kind of information and even found stuff from like Michigan Association of Planning. Planners have been dealing with this as well across the state and the nation. What we wanted to do was walk through the sections of our sign ordinance. We provided the entire sign ordinance as an attachment as well. Staff sort of offering a suggestion of kind of walking through this. We highlighted where specifically things might be good to take a look at. And specifically, a lot of these court cases are dealing with like content regulation in signs, and to remove references in regulating signs in that way. And there's kind of a specific set of examples which I'll get to later. But I think we wanted to approach it just kind of walking through that and highlighting these things. We didn't provide at this point like any suggested changes, but we're proposing if at least kind of pointing out the areas that might warrant taking a look at if we came back next study session with here's how we could address these in the different parts of the ordinance, of the sign ordinance. So in terms of actually just walking through like the way the sign ordinance is set up, I don't want to do every section in as great a detail, but the first section is just regulations and conditions. Has like your purpose statement for signs, and specifically since these keep coming up in front of the Supreme Court, often what's cited is First Amendment issues, free speech. So even our current ordinance actually says that one of the purposes is to ensure that the constitutionally guaranteed right of free speech is protected and to allow signs as a means of communication. So it even establishes that, and that's been cited as a recommended sort of best practice anyway, to just cite that specifically. So we already have that in our sign ordinances. We have a section just identifying applicability, identifying provisions for non-conforming signs. One thing I cited here, and it's sort of kind of a theme through some of these, is it's sort of just the way some of these are written, and if they can be written in what might be called a content-neutral way, like the way this one provision in here talks about how legal non-conforming signs may not be continued in use after cessation or change of the business or activity to which the sign pertains. And the sort of to which the sign pertains is kind of a content based regulation. Anything that speaks to the content of the sign itself. Other aspects, like if the sign were falling apart, that doesn't talk about content. If it's damaged, if it's broken, that doesn't talk about content. If it just says this business went out of business, so you have to remove the sign for it, that's essentially saying a content-based regulation, potentially. Yeah, these are...
Have you gone through?
The actuals, yeah, go ahead.
Have you gone through the,
Yeah.
these court cases and found
Yeah.
anything in our sign ordinances that would be in violation of those?
Potentially, everything that's sort of underlined in the staff report is all potentially content-based things. Now, there may be ways to write them in non-content-based ways. I might just even skip ahead a little bit, since this is going to be dry going through the entire thing. But the one court case that was cited the most is this Reed versus Town of Gilbert. And it was, Reed was like the pastor of a church, and Gilbert is the town, I think in Arizona. They didn't have a permanent location, so they were putting up signs where people could find their services that week, because they had to rent space in different spaces. And they regulated like event signs differently than political signs, differently than like opinion signs. They had kind of different categories. They were all different, regulated different ways. And what was sort of found in this court case was the way it was cited in sort of the majority opinion, and I speak as I am not a lawyer, so I would love John to comment on this if he were here. But what was sort of found was if you have to read the sign to figure out how it's regulated, then it's content-based, and therefore it could be subject to, like, you're treating them differently if you have to read it to figure out if it's different. The way to potentially deal with that, whether it's what are ones we see that are about that size? Someone could put up a sign for their event. Someone could put up a sign for a garage sale. Someone could put up a political sign, as we get closer and closer to elections. But we even see people putting up kind of political signs that have nothing to do with an election. Like you see the...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you just see something like that. You see support our troops, which is a potentially political statement, but has nothing to do with an election timeline. You see kind of all of these could be categorized as what they are yard signs. And so I think in a nutshell, what it's saying is figure out a regulation for yard signs. What size can they be? What total amount? Things like that. And you regulate yard signs. Don't refer to whether they have a political message, whether they have an event message, whether they have whatever the message is. Refer to them as those are yard signs. I think is kind of the, in a nutshell, way to describe that.
But just using that as an
Yeah.
example, because
Mhm.
we're just having a little discussion.
Yeah.
So if I want to put, I support our troops,
Yep.
or I want to put Molly Augustinelli for political office,
Mm-hmm.
would you think that you would need to take a look at the length of time I mean, with political signs, it's usually, I think, are 30 days or, there's this amount of time and you got to get them out of there. Otherwise, you'd have them sitting around forever.
Right.
But support our troops
Yeah.
might be the same size sign,
Exactly.
but I might want to leave that there for 12 months.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So how would you distinguish that? I
Right.
mean,
I think what it's saying is, like, if both of those signs, regardless of the message, if they're both otherwise allowed and they're both in good condition, like they're not falling apart, they both take up the same amount of space, it's saying, like, how can we tell someone to take down one of them because of the message that's on it? When they both otherwise take up the same amount of space, have the same impact on things that are going on. Like, I think it's essentially saying, like, our current way we do political signs, it has the square feet in area, they're spaced apart, but the end of it is may not be erected for more than 4 months prior to the election and shall be removed within 5 calendar days. I think it's essentially saying that could be challenged and may not stand up if it were challenged. That part of that regulation, at least what I'm saying.
yeah.
Yeah. Because we've seen kind of, in American culture, we have a very long election cycle. I've seen some from the previous election that have either been there or been erected in between that time, or just referred to a candidate's name. They're out there. If they are otherwise in good condition and otherwise don't refer to something that's time-based, at least the way I interpret it, that's sort of what that's saying.
So if,
Yeah.
going back to the same, that
Yeah.
that political sign,
Mm-hmm.
if we had a distance between signs,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to put my political sign in my yard,
Mm-hmm.
and my neighbor who's, 30 feet away from me wants to put up I got a yard sale going
Mhm.
sign. And somebody else 30 feet, I mean, they would not be very far apart, because each person, you might want a whole street of them, or
Mhm.
how would you do that? And it's not of the same kind of sign.
Mm-hmm.
One might have this message, one might have this message, one
Right.
might have this one. Okay, here's a temporary religious thing going on in my house. I'm going to put a sign out there
Mhm.
about graduation party, or
Mhm.
any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems kind of odd, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, like, if you had, like, if they were spaced out a certain amount, you could kind of calculate, in theory, you could do, like, a setback from a property line along with spacing them, so you could determine a sort of maximum number you could have. Like, that could be calculated for a lot if you had all those in place. And if you were, like, say, at your maximum, if you then wanted to do a yard sale, it might be swap out one of your signs so you're not taking up any more space. Like, this is the maximum total signage, this is the maximum total, like, impact. So you might have to swap out if you want to do that. But
this
to
is-
allow everyone to have some amount.
it's going to be an interesting one to look at.
Exactly, yeah,
I feel like,
yeah.
I'm seeing from the staff write-up
Yeah.
that a great deal of, assuming everything here that's underlined you think is questionable relative to recent
Mm-hmm,
recent court cases.
mm-hmm.
I'd be curious to see, well, first of all, are there things that can be classified as not a sign, or not a sign that is,
Mhm.
because we're trying to regulate individual signs, and I see, like, right at the top, address numbers and street names.
Mm-hmm.
Street names are public signs,
Mm-hmm.
not private signs. So some of this might be easily resolved. Even address numbers, we
Mhm.
all have it's the 911,
Yeah.
everybody has the green sign.
Right.
Those are, maybe those aren't considered. Can we break it down between public and private signs?
Yeah, I think it's because even, like, the nuance of, like, the whole content based is that anything content based would and this gets into legal terms I don't know exactly all the details of, but they say it would be subject to strict scrutiny. There's like different levels of judicial scrutiny. Again, a question for John Racine or a lawyer. But like it's like the more scrutiny there is, there has to be not just like a good enough reason, there has to be like a compelling reason. In that case, there is a compelling reason that everyone has to display their address number so that 911 or emergency services can find you, so that mail can be delivered to your house. So like exempting it in that like signs required for the health, safety, and welfare of the community, including address signs, something like broad in that provision, I think could still be okay to state that. Yeah.
And it strikes me that there's
Yeah.
an approach to maybe breaking this up into pieces.
Yeah.
That maybe the first thing is to kind of, one thing, not necessarily first. One thing is to identify signs which are public in nature or informational, like what you just said.
Yep.
And that is an area of signage that we can figure out how to address in a revised ordinance. The second thing would be the variety of private homeowner signs,
Mm-hmm.
whether they be political or this is where the birthday party's at, or garage sale, or whatever. You know, there's all those private signs that we want to try. You know, and then there's an intent to regulate that. You know, we want people to be able to permanently post no
Mhm.
trespassing and no hunting.
Yep.
You know, how do we achieve that
Mm-hmm.
on a private property basis? And
Right.
what are the different kinds of signs? And kind of we can work through them one at a time. And
Right.
you can tell us how we can continue to regulate them within the context of this recent judicial actions and law cases.
Right.
And then
Mhm.
the other piece of it is our commercial sign ordinances.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we go about regulating those to maintain our intent to regulate the size? Mostly it's just size, isn't it? And the lighting? Or am I missing something? Am I oversimplifying the commercial signs?
Those are the biggest things, I think, size and lighting, and then billboards, which there's an entire section on billboards specifically as well.
We don't allow billboards in our township, do we?
We do allow some amount of billboards. There's a section in there, because there are some in
Oh,
town.
yeah, we have some on
Airport Road,
Airport Road
Yeah.
and on
going out 37, 31, 37.
and Cass.
Yeah.
Yep. Those would be in the township, so we do have some billboards.
US
down the
31
line.
and Silver Pines.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I guess I just don't see them.
Yeah.
Oh, the news lady's gone, but she could have got me on record as saying, I don't see billboards.
You just drive by.
And we did actually recently, because I was looking at this section and saw the billboards, there are some very specific regulations. And we also were looking around, it seems like there's more places that have either put a moratorium, like around the state, or like have some limits to billboards specifically, like as a type of signage, more so than others, because it's a little more impacts on health, safety, and welfare, because it could be, depending on where they are or how they're constructed, could be distracting, could impact the characters of neighborhoods. So we actually have some very specific regulations for billboards, that there's no more than 20 billboard signs or 40 faces, depending on how they're structured. I actually did make a map of all the billboards that are currently in the township. And then they're only permitted in IG and IL, and also not permitted within a half mile of Bermley, Hammond, and Hartman. Those are specifically listed in there. So that's a question I also have, and would this stand up to like a strict scrutiny? But it seems like if other communities are putting moratoriums on new billboards, seemingly billboards and commercial speech specifically doesn't have the same like level of protection as non-commercial speech, because then it doesn't get into the same as a First Amendment issue, which the non-commercial is. So if there's ways to strengthen that or take a look at that, I think that's almost worthy as its own discussion, and we might have some ideas with that already. But we did, in the process of that, make a map of all the billboards in the township. I think we're already at essentially the either 20 structures or 40 faces. We're close if we're not there already.
And then the other burr in my bonnet always is the private garage sale sign that goes up and comes down for a couple of days in a public corner.
Oh, signs in the right of way.
No problem.
Yeah.
But when people start putting their political signs up in public spaces,
Mm-hmm.
I drive by, and every fifth time I get angry, and I'm half tempted to just pull over and yank the sign, but I know when
Do it.
a replacement will show up the next day.
Yeah. And we did also ask our code enforcement officers, because they are picking up signs. They've, I believe, picked up some political signs already
Good.
This season. We did ask, or I asked them, is there like an official agreement? I don't think there's anything written, but there is an understanding, like with the road commissioner, MDOT, that like we have the code enforcement officers who are out and about and can pick up signs out of the right of way. Because it does say in our own ordinance that signs cannot be in the right of way. So it is our ordinance we're enforcing, even though it's their right of way. So
Wait,
it is
the right-of-way
in.
so like the right of way that fronts my home?
Let's see. Let me.
Whatever.
Prohibited
right away. I don't
signs.
know what.
There's a political sign that's not in the road right away out there. I mean, they're all.
They can't really be,
I
right?
believe it says that
Yeah,
specifically.
I personally don't have any, my home shared driveway, the 3 residents on the shared driveway, it's all, we'd have to clear the right of way and then clear 20 feet beyond the right of way in order to not put a political sign at the, or mine happens to be for the school board, or not for the school board, for the
Yep.
the millage. Yes, I have a millage sign. It's right next to my mailbox because that's the only-
Probably in the road right away.
Oh, it's totally the road right away.
Send them out. Get them picked up.
Yeah, prohibited signs, number 10 is signs except those established and maintained by municipal, county, state, or federal governments, because there's your stop sign and
Yeah.
everything. Located in, projecting into, or overhanging within a public right-of-way or dedicated public easement.
Interesting.
That's actually in our ordinance, so
Well,
yes.
just for clarification, I'm distinguishing between like street corners
Yeah,
versus the right of way in front of my home.
right,
Do
right.
I
that.
Because there's
know.
like the clear vision area at corners, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I'm just reading out of the ordinance. Yeah, you're, like what you're referring to also is like the clear vision area of the street.
Right.
Am I correct? Yeah.
Well, I mean, not necessarily clear vision. You know, there's plenty of intersections that have a tract of public
Yeah.
right of way.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I'm in particular thinking of right near my home, the intersection of Front Street, North Long Lake, and Cedar Run.
Yeah.
The whole northwest corner of that intersection is a tract of county, the county owns it.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Political signs tend to
Lots of
show up in it.
signs.
Okay, yep.
And I think there are other similar rural or non-rural intersections where signs show up.
Now they'll put them in the railroad right of way. Often you see them right next to the railroads because there's
Mhm.
really nobody except from the railroad,
Right.
Right,
and they don't come up here, so.
right. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, any place where there's not a private citizen who's like, that's my property, or my right of way,
Yeah.
you can't put your sign there.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get off my soapbox now.
Let's go.
So how do you want to approach this?
I mean, yeah, is it thorny? Absolutely. We just brought up a whole bunch of good things. I think, it would be good to answer, I kind of like the way, Chris, you brought up kind of like categorizing some of these. Because even kind of the like 4 categories, so signs in the right of way, like that, is one category. Commercial is its own set to think about. The sort of public in nature, like that to me, like almost ties to the health, safety, and welfare, and even like not just addresses, but like the no trespassing or no hunting. That could in theory, be tied to like a safety measure. So anything that could be tied to that, I think if we found like the category of that, I would down the line want to ask, like if we like pitch a revised sign ordinance for legal reviews, like are these all tied to health, safety, and welfare, and therefore can we exempt them? And this is not, either it's not content based or it would survive scrutiny because we actually have reasons for doing that. The other one I even thought of, which I don't know if it's necessarily public in nature, but I actually did email some folks about this, but like signs that are placed like by another entity, and I'm thinking of two that we don't have maybe a ton of examples of signage, but like a historic marker, which is a sign, and some of them have like a longer explanation of what they are, or like a Centennial Farm, which are often signed as what they are. In that case, like there's very specific qualifications to even be eligible for that, and like to me that shouldn't be in the same category as like other yard signs. It's like you only get that under very specific circumstances. So like if it's either placed by another entity, like would that survive a strict scrutiny? I tried to ask, like I emailed like the people behind the Centennial Farm. I forget, that's like the Historical Society of Michigan.
Probably.
Something, I forget their exact name, but I think they're actually established under a state act of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if like the same with like a historical marker, somehow tying it to like if it's established and maintained by a municipal, county, state, or federal government. Like if this is established under a state act, I'm like, okay, this is not something we consider. Just if we can list everything that, in that case, we just say it's not under our jurisdiction. Like, because we didn't permit that specifically, someone else qualified for it, and that entity placed it. So that's not even our sign at that point.
But they're all content-based.
Right. But we would state, like, in order to survive a scrutiny, we would either just exempt it as not
Regulated
this,
by the state.
regulated by the state, not our sign, not like ask the state if you think this is content based or not. So, yeah,
One more thing I want to add,
yeah,
just listening to the different concerns that you have.
yeah.
I think we could spend a reasonable amount of time
Mm-hmm.
rewriting the ordinance to address the low-hanging fruit of,
Yeah.
what was the term you used, scrutiny,
Scrutiny. Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But we could spend an inordinate amount of time trying to
Yeah.
make this sign ordinance perfect.
Exactly.
And I would like to see us spend that, reasonable amount of time to get 80-90% of the way there of, it will, if it underwent scrutiny, nobody could, somebody would have to try really hard or have an obscure case in order to
Yeah.
sue us and make a sign example of us. That's
Exactly.
kind of what our goal should be.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not to have the perfect,
Mm-hmm.
it'll get all the way through the Supreme Court unscathed
Yeah.
kind of ordinance, but
Yeah.
just something that
You can
nobody-
never.
Just
you
like
can never-
anything in
I know,
any
right?
part of the zoning ordinance.
Just something
Yeah.
nobody's like, and
Yeah.
then that law review at the end is not really, is it perfect? But you've done a reasonable job of minimizing
Yeah.
the likelihood of
Mm-hmm.
undergoing scrutiny from a
Right.
sign owner.
Exactly. Yeah. I think. What do people think about something like that?
Yeah, no,
Okay, yeah.
you're on the right track. I mean, we're not taking action again on this item tonight, but
No.
I think staff looking for some direction on where to go, so.
Yep.
I like where we're headed, so.
Okay.
While we're on the subject of signs, I was gonna bring it up tonight anyway, and since, perfect timing, section P11,
All right.
not allowed signs, public, or signs which revolve, move, flash, including electronic changeable message boards, running animated displays, so on and so forth. Have your zoning administrator go drive by Seven Brew.
Seven Brew. Okay.
They've got a new sign that popped up, probably 3x4, that's may as well be a television playing commercials. And we've already had round one with 7 brews, so it looks like
Yeah.
we may have to have round 2.
Which one, both of them, or one
I
of
just
them?
saw it at the one at, I gassed up at Mutual the other day, and
Oh.
pulled out, and I'm staring at this, it's probably like, say, 3 by 4 feet, and it is a full animated, display, I said, I don't think we allow those in the township.
It sounds like you can gas up and watch TV at the
Well, you
same time.
could,
can.
you watch a movie, drive-in movie, pretty much, with a little bigger screen, but
Yep.
have them take a look at that, if
Okay.
you don't mind.
Yep.
I think you'll find that it's
Noted, okay.
out of line, so,
All right.
all right.
All right.
All right, moving on, item 6D, Planning Department Report 2024-55, City of Traverse City Master Plan Review.
You guys want me to join the audience or just recuse myself in place?
Just keep your mouth
We
shut.
so often don't have audience.
quiet,
like,
John.
yeah.
It's really hard for me.
Yeah. All right. So yes, as you know, City of Traverse City has been working on their master plan and started their 63-day public review period earlier in June, and that's going to end on August 6th. So, as we've replied to others, and as we've kind of noted, it seems like everyone has done their master plan the last year or two here. Traverse City has done theirs, and as a companion to it, also did a parallel process for a mobility action plan focusing on transportation, specifically like non-motorized transportation. So we kind of went through. We kind of went a little bit in depth on some of the things that regarded like future land use. The city also had a future corridor planning section, and then parts of the mobility action plan. We wanted to include comparison between our own future land use map that was just recently adopted and like the city's future land use framework that they're taking a look at. Same thing with like our own non-motorized plan versus things that were in their non-motorized plan. Before I get there, actually, just reminded me, because I looked up there, updated the printed future land use map that's behind you, in case you were looking at that earlier. So let me look at.
It looks like your comments are all kind of on non-motorized.
Yeah, they're mostly the future land
Connections.
use. To kind of, in a nutshell, summarize page 1 and 2. The city's mostly built out anyway, so sort of anything, I think, on some of these corridors. There seem to be a couple opportunities on some of their nodes or corridors, like up by M72 and M22, which we put a mixed-use designation at M72 in West Bay, kind of coming off Woodmere a little bit. There might be some opportunities, or not even opportunities, it's more like there might be compatibility if both sides experience a little bit of
Yeah.
new development. But otherwise, like a lot of their corridors are already built out. A lot of activity might be redevelopment, and some of their other focus areas were further into the city anyway. But otherwise, things are generally seem compatible. Wanted to comment on a few things with their kind of mobility network, their sidewalk and trail network. So they did a inventory of their sidewalks and areas that are missing sidewalks. So I just wanted to comment that some of those areas that they showed as currently missing in the city border the township, including up again near M72 and 22, along Boone Street. I know they've started to get some into like the Traverse Heights neighborhood, but Boone being their southern border. And also along Garfield Avenue in front of the airport. And we commented specifically as staff, we've seen a lot of new sidewalk over in that corner of the township in front of Cherryland, and even some of the newer things on the east side of Garfield. So I think what they proposed was connecting on the east side, because there's still some amount of the city, like some of what was Bill Marsh's property that's now also part of Sarah. Some of that, even south of the airport approach, is still in the city before you get to the township. So let me actually pull up the map, this will be easier to highlight. So there's the airport approach. All the colored areas with color on it are township, everything else is city. So there's still a little bit that they do have sidewalk in front of, so I think they were focusing on this side of the connection because they already have it here and there. I think for us, we have it on this side. Currently nothing here, but we're planning for and getting additional sidewalk on this portion of Cherry Line on that side. But we did comment that that also requires cooperation with the airport themselves. I think when that question has been asked, even though it's in the city, it's still airport property, and I think they either need to sign off or somehow we need to factor into this, because that is the airport approach. I think there's some worry about safety in terms of that, which I think is a good question to ask, although there's also a road going straight in front of the airport approach. So I would, ask the airport what is a feasible solution here. But both parts of the airport approach on that side are in the city, so I think it's mostly going to be theirs to kind of take the lead on. We also just noted some other kind of areas that might be good to forward to as comments to the city. Connecting, there's a good amount of trail between the Commons Natural area and the city. It has a pathway system. Let me go over to that section real quick. Because it's something we noted in our own non-motorized plan. Commons Natural Area, sorry about that, that was closer than I thought it was. Commons Natural Area Trail goes right by, this is Greenspires right here. The trailhead is here, and this is where we are going to be doing that accessible trail loop with the trust fund grant. There is the end of the Buffalo Ridge Trail is right here, and then this trail goes into the city's network. So there seems to be a way, I don't know if specifically where there should be, but to have a connection somewhere. And that's right at the edge of the city and township border. And that's something we highlighted in our non-motorized plan. So just wanted to make them aware of that. Also the sidewalk at West Front Street. If I turn off our zoning, but you see the blue area in front of these buildings, there is sidewalk in front of those. Those are recent in the last year or two from our zoning ordinance requiring those improvements as they do improvements. These were two of them. We did find that there is one property that is technically in the city because there's this funky border here. But then there's trails through it. There's trails on Olson. There's again our accessible trail that's going to be at the Commons, and then going along Medical Campus Drive. So this one piece we wanted to highlight that is an important connection if they have a way to plan for that or trigger that at some point in the future that connects. And just sort of as a general comment, that if there's opportunities or ways to make completions in the network on both sides of the border, that seems to make sense to collaborate and then both communities partner with organizations like TART or others to just keep that going. But that's pretty much all we had to comment. There was a lot of material in the city's plan. They had a rather large appendix, but they did have a shorter kind of summary. But that's sort of all we had to say on the city's master plan.
Anybody other than Chris have any comments?
You want the motion?
Does anybody have any other comments or Otherwise, we're prepared to, as the motion talks about, we can draft a letter like we've done for some of the others and just highlight some of these comments.
There, I'll make the motion that planning staff is directed to prepare and send a letter to the City of Traverse City Planning Commission outlining the comments of the Planning Commission.
Support.
Motion made and supported to direct staff to prepare the letter to the city based on the Planning Department Report 2024-55. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
New business? I don't see anything under new business.
No new business.
Okay. This is our second and final public comment, and I do not see any
I think you
public.
scared everybody off.
Yeah, we scared them all
We did
away.
have some, we had a person, but they left, yeah.
Yeah. So we will open and close public comment. Any other business come before the board tonight? Okay, if not, we'll go to items for our next agenda. Looks like we have at least 3 items. The Potter's Home Retreat Bed and Breakfast Special Use Permit Update, excuse me. Tower North Wireless Communication Facility Special Use Permit, a follow-up on that, and then also an introduction from French Manor, Lafreniere for a special use permit major amendment.
Yeah, I'll highlight those, and then also schedule a public hearing for the R3.
Okay.
So that will be on the agenda as well. The one I'll highlight first is that French Manor Lafreniere. It is not the same property. So they recently did this one in the last, I think it was reviewed in 2019, and then it's been built out. They had one phase and recently added the next phase. Is here. It is not that site. They also have one further up Lafreniere. I think it is this one. Closer to closer to South Airport, like kind of right at the top of the hill. They do have a property there. There's an existing building, and they're proposing an expansion. So we received an application. We've sent them a completeness review, awaiting some either additional or updated information, but is at least anticipated for an introduction for that meeting.
Okay.
So we have the public hearing for R3, we have this as an introduction, and then follow-up if we will continue to follow up with status of legal review, and hopefully if we get that by then, which I think is feasible, if we're prepared to actually take action. We tabled the action on the bed and breakfast pending the legal review. So if we have that information on hand, we can prepare to make that decision, or at least have the information ready if the Plan Commission is willing to entertain making a decision on that. And then we are anticipating some updated information from the Tower North. As I said, they've been looking at relocating that tower to meet the ordinance requirements. So if we get updated plan sets or other materials, we can bring that back to that meeting as well. But that's all we're anticipating at this.
All right.
And you said you will be absent at that meeting?
I will
Okay.
not be at the next
All
meeting.
right, so we have,
Oh,
all right,
it's that one.
okay.
Try and
Alright.
fill the big shoes.
You can handle it.
All right.
All right.
I'd make a motion that we
You're
adjourn.
used to it. I got a few more months anyway. Something's got to figure out something. So,
Bob's made a motion.
what do you got, Bob?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
We are adjourned.
All right.